July 2nd, 2026. On a video call with his investors, the co-founder of a company called RealT announces that he is selling everything. Every asset. All of them. What he is selling is, mostly, Detroit. About 700 houses owned in $50 slices by roughly 22,000 people around the world, most of whom have never set foot in Michigan. By that day, the city had sued. The taxes had gone unpaid, and some of the houses had never legally belonged to the company that sold them. Here is the strangest part of this story. Through all 7 years of it, the blockchain worked perfectly. That is not the defense. That is the lesson. Start in 2019. The pitch was genuinely new. Take a cheap Detroit rental house, put it in its own legal wrapper, split that wrapper into about 1,000 digital tokens, and sell them for as little as $50 each. Rent came back the same way. Every week, automatically, each holder's share of the rent arrived in their wallet as digital dollars. No paperwork, no claim forms. Rent, every single week, on-chain. And people wanted it. A $60,000 Detroit house would sell out its entire token offering in about 10 seconds, averaging more than 250 investors per property. 1 year in, RealT had 7 properties and about $550 a day in rent flowing through the system. Then it compounded. By its own 2022 retrospective, the company had tokenized more than 970 units across 5 markets, from Detroit to Cleveland to Florida, roughly 1 property a day since launch. The money was global, and above all, French. Of the roughly 22,000 investors RealT would eventually count, about 14,000 were in France, following French-language investor calls, French newsletters, a whole French community of small landlords who had never seen Detroit. To be fair to the engineering, it was not frictionless. The original design paid rent daily on Ethereum, until gas fees made single distributions cost hundreds of dollars. Between 2020 and 2021, RealT moved payouts to a cheaper chain and settled into the weekly rhythm it kept from then on. A real scaling problem, found and fixed at the infrastructure layer. The academics even checked the economics. A peer-reviewed study in 2023 analyzed 58 of these tokenized rentals and found the token prices tracked local housing prices. In the paper's words, they behave like real estate investments, but at a smaller scale. The mechanics did what the white paper promised. The problem was never the tokens. It was everything the tokens were pointing at. By February 2025, local investigative reporting painted a different Detroit than the investor dashboards did. More than 300 properties behind on taxes, more than 200 facing tax foreclosure, roughly $2 million owed to the city, over 1,000 mostly unpaid blight tickets. Reporters found the company telling investors vacancy was around 2%, while their own count put it closer to 20. Of 25 properties offered to investors in a single January, 21 were behind on taxes. Inside the houses were tenants nobody was answering. Shirkara Ayers, on Detroit's east side, reported a broken shower, a flooded bathroom, black mold, and years of ignored work orders. Her verdict: as far as I can tell, they're slumlords. Another tenant, Chiona White, says she spent $5,000 of her own money on repairs. The property management for hundreds of homes had been pulled in-house, run, by 2026, by what reporters described as a 5-person skeleton crew. And the weekly rent that had defined the product? It kept flowing on-chain for as long as there was anything to send. The rails did not stop. The revenue did. Then the reporting got underneath the deeds, and this is where the story turns. In July 2025, Outlier Media found that RealT had collected $2.72 million from investors for a bundle of East Side homes on Lilliebridge and Fairview, whose purchase had never closed. The legal owner was still the seller. RealT says it paid 80% of the price. The seller disputes that. Either way, investors held tokens for houses the company did not own. It was not a one-off. At 100320 Roxbury Street, RealT sold more than $100,000 in tokens. The recorded deed belongs to a man named Corey Edwards, who bought the house through a title company and had never heard of RealT. His words: I went through a title company, I purchased the property, I have a warranty deed with my title. In total, reporters found the company had sold roughly $94 million in tokens against about 700 Detroit properties, while lacking demonstrated clear ownership of nearly 100 of them, and about 300 were missing the transfer paperwork Michigan requires to record a sale at all. Then, the mortgages. In October 2021, co-founder Jean-Marc Jacobson said there were, quote, no mortgages on RealT properties. Investigators found $4.8 million in mortgages across 33 of them. On an investor call in April 2025, Jacobson called them, quote, mortgages, quote unquote, there just for a day or two, a week, a month. On July 2, 2025, the city of Detroit filed suit. 408 properties held through 165 different corporate entities, with the founders named personally. The city's top lawyer called it the largest nuisance abatement lawsuit ever filed by the city of Detroit. 3 weeks later, Judge Annette Berry ordered the most dangerous vacant properties secured within 30 days and let tenants pay rent into escrow instead of to the landlord. The city asked for a receiver. The judge said no, not yet. What the parties agreed to instead, in April 2026, was in some ways more interesting. An independent fiduciary, Charles Bullock, placed over roughly 700 Detroit properties with control of renovations, sales, and evictions on a court-supervised schedule. 210 homes brought to compliance by October 2027. Read that arrangement again slowly, because it is a design document. Independent control of funds, an escrow account, verified occupancy reporting, a compliance timeline. A court had just built, adversarially and expensively, the servicing infrastructure a well-designed issuance would have had on day one. And then, 1 year to the day after the lawsuit, came the investor call. July 2, 2026. Jean-Marc Jacobson, in his own words, "We are going to sell every asset, all of them." In France, where most of the investors live, a fraud specialist lawyer is now organizing a collective action, and a criminal complaint has been filed in Paris. Now the part almost nobody says out loud. Go looking in all of that wreckage for the blockchain failure. There is not one in the record. No hack, no lost ledger, no failed transfer, no misdistribution while money existed to distribute. Every documented failure in this story is off-chain. Maintenance, taxes, disclosures, deeds. It is stranger than that. The on-chain records are how the failures were caught. Every token sale and rent payment was public. Investors built their own dashboards from it. Reporters cross-referenced the company's on-chain claims against county deed records and postal vacancy data. Try doing that with an opaque private syndicate. You usually find out in bankruptcy court. The token ledger stayed perfectly consistent with itself. What nobody had built was the anchor tying it to the county ledger, the one that decides who actually owns a house. The regulators, for once, said it cleanly. The SEC, this January. A security does not cease to be a security solely because it is tokenized or recorded on a blockchain. The obligations RealT is accused of failing exist with or without the token. So what does someone who wants to do this properly take from Detroit? 3 things. 1. Servicing is the product. A token is a claim on a cash flow, and the cash flow only exists if someone collects the rent, pays the taxes, and fixes the roofs. As Oxford's Andrew Baum put it, if your roof is leaking, how do you get money out of the company? 2. Structure alone saves no one. RealT's legal wrapper was textbook. 1 company per house, exactly what the manuals recommend. Paper protection failed because execution and disclosure failed on top of it. 3. The deed comes before the token. Title verified, transfer recorded, then issuance. Never the other way around. And the fix is already visible elsewhere. In November, Saudi Arabia ran its first property tokenization as a layer on top of the National Deed Registry itself, tokens natively linked to the official record of who owns what. That is Detroit's failure, inverted at the design stage. Dubai has gone further. A regulated secondary market for tokenized properties, verified by the Land Department. Even Detroit's own lawyer, the man who sued, says the sell-off could create opportunities for tenants and first-time buyers to own the homes. The houses were always real. The rails were always real. What was missing was everything in between, and that is the part you can actually build. New episode every week. The playbook for doing it right, from a government that did, is in the Hong Kong episode. Subscribe and we will follow the money.